after looking at all this, and what we then turned around and did for the sound circuits in the 800 and then the sound circuits in the Amiga. The Amiga has 4-channel sampling. It has 4 different DMA engines in parallel, where you can specify a piece of memory, where it is and how long it is and how fast it's sampled. So you can take an 8-bit waveform and lay it in memory and play it any way you want. It was sampling, and it was built, it was just part of the base Amiga. In 1984, Atari did a deal, Jerry I think here was involved in it, of picking up the guts of the Amiga, which was a monster killer machine, and selling it without a keyboard, meaning as a home game machine. If they had had the guts to do that, they would have blown Nintendo away.
Exactly. Well, today, the Amiga has a tremendous market share of game players in the UK. I mean, today, if you because for many years, the Amiga was the preeminent game player in both Germany and the UK, and it had a lot to do with shareware games, and it was a killer game unit, and you could buy it for $500, and it had a keyboard so that you had a lot of homework. It
also took floppies as the game input, so the cost of goods for manufactured games is zip.
Exactly.
And the 800 was supposed to be a game machine, don't you remember? It was supposed to be a game machine.
It was
Only the hardware cost was $105, therefore the retail was going to have to be $300, and Kassar said we'll never sell a $300 game machine.
Kassar neglected the mathematics that the Nintendo people figured out, which was, did you sell the console more or less at
razors
cost?
and razor blades.
Yeah,
And he didn't understand it, so he said, let's put a keyboard, and someone said, put a keyboard and a disc and a printer on it, and we'll call it a computer.
The problem, of course, with that is the engineering department put the keyboard on, but still plan on designing a video game machine.
That's right.
So
the biggest fault was the aluminum casing that cost so much money that it almost killed it, and it
but
didn't
that was
need
the
it.
FCC RFI stuff that
But
changed.
Apple got away with it. But in a way, Amiga was the same thing.
Yeah. Maybe even more so.
We started Amiga originally, it was supposed to be a game machine. But then, I dropped out and you dropped out. They went ahead and ended up doing another computer. And I still think it was a mistake. You should have made a game machine. But
Should have made both, really, because it was good in both directions.
It was the best game machine at the time, and it would have been the Nintendo, again.
Easily.
But there was the same problem, as I recall, the cost
A whole
of
lot of
goods.
confusing stuff happened. Their business plan featured feasting on the Atari success. They got less venture capital than they should have got because they intended to do Atari cartridge things to generate cash to invest in the new design. That fell through, so they ran out of money, so the project took longer than expected because it was hand-to-mouth. Second thing that happened was they went through this transition in early 1984 where this dance happened. Trammell left Commodore and borrowed the consumer side of Atari from Warner, and meantime, Amiga was sold to what was left of Commodore. So Commodore was this large but headless company, didn't know what to do with Amiga. They looked at the Amiga and they said, oh, yeah, that could be a nice game machine, but we've already taken this Commodore 128 and added some other glue to it, and so they had their low-cost home computer already, and the Macintosh came out at the same time in January of 1984, and the Commodore people said, let's make a color Mac. So they delayed the thing for a year and a half. They built a real, massively multimedia, multitasking, it was a glorious operating system, it was a color Mac. But it took an extra couple of years to make this color Mac happen. By the time they brought it out, they had taken it out of its original market and positioned it between the Macintosh, which was successful, and the PC, which was successful. The world didn't need a third operating system.
Right.
It was too expensive for the home users. It didn't have PC compatibility or Mac compatibility. So it became a cult favorite for some video games and for the video production people because it was designed from scratch to sync itself up with a TV
Which
or
nothing
a VCR.
else did.
Which nothing else
But again, it was
which-
designed as a game machine. It was
Right.
Jay Miner and Joe Decuir. It was basically VCS2.
Right.
And it was supposed
No,
to
it was
be
VCS3.
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 That's right. VCS3.
We originally intended it to do home cartoons. I mean, we actually intended it to be able to do interactive games where the script was played out in real time. The
Yeah.
thing could display fantastic stuff. I don't know if any of you have seen the demos.
Oh,
We
yeah.
had
We did a lot of
street
games for
scenes
it.
with, yeah. It was intended as an animation tour de force, and the company didn't market it that way.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Same problem we're talking about. In fact, the problem you talked about,
Yeah.
the lack of foresight.
It was a great game machine when you could get around the operating system.
Right, exactly.
You just scrap it.
And they built the operating system because they had the illusion that what they needed was a color Mac.
That's because of the cost issue again, same problem.
What
And
they should have
because-
built was something like the Amiga 1000, but simplified and
No,
shipped
just-
it 2 years earlier.
It should have been razor's razor blade. And 3DO had the exact same problem.
Yeah.
The system, they sold it for $700 because they felt, well, we have to do our normal costing. What they should have done is what everybody else does. Sony, which is you lose money. And just like you said, drop it out of airplanes and you make it up in the software. And Sony proved finally, and Nintendo did, that that was possible. And
Right.
nobody believed that before then. That was the 800. That was supposed to be a game machine that Joe and Jay designed.
Right, if we'd
That-
introduced the 5200 in, let's say, 1980. And if we'd
79, I
introduced-
think, was the critical year for introduction.
Yeah.
You introduced in 79.
We did bring out the 800 in 79, but positioned as a computer.
Right.
Right.
We
And the
could have
burden
there
was
should
the
have
cost
been-
of being a
It
computer.
should have been a game machine.
There should have been a game machine that had been started then. Maybe. But,
No, it was ready. We sold the 800 as a computer in 79. We could have sold it as a game machine, easier.
Right.
Because it took us an extra 6 months to do this operating system and the
And all
printer,
the
the disk
peripherals.
drives, and the FCC approval with that huge shield and the whole bit.
We were making a great game machine out of the 800 in 79, 80, and 81. Jay and I would have hung around. We would have blown everybody's doors off with the Amiga in like 82 or 83.
Exactly.
And I worked as a consultant for Amiga. I was badge number 3, basically. Did the system architecture and the giant timing diagrams and basically the architecture design and the detail for the Agnes chip, which was our third system. And because Atari wasn't interested and Commodore wasn't interested. And so that was an attempt to recreate what Atari should have done.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
why I left,
exactly.
I left Activision to do Amiga for just that reason. We were sitting at Activision, there was no hardware system. I said, well, if no one's going to do it, I'll do it. And that's why I went off to talk to Jay at the semiconductor company. I said, let's do a new game system.
One person could not make it today, Jay Miner, and if there's anything that you'd like to say about him, since he can't be here, that he couldn't say, then by all means, things about him, anything that you'd like to be known.
Boy, I wish I could channel him. Jay was my mentor. He wasn't my first engineering boss after I got out of college, but he was the one who taught me about it. He was the one who said things like memos were mostly good for covering people's derrieres, and who reminded us constantly that success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan, that we had to be team players and we couldn't just run around taking credit for each other's work. We all hung together that way. He was organized and methodical. His enthusiasm motivated us. He was almost the antithesis of Dilbert's boss. He would walk into anybody's office, sit down, look them in the eyeball, listen to them before he got in their face to tell them what to do. He brought the best out of us.
He had so much humanity as
Yeah.
an individual. I mean, you couldn't help but feel like this is a really nice, genuine human being.
Yeah.
You know, and he's probably one of the people that you say, how could so much nice guy be wrapped up in such a great mind? You know, I mean, it was one of those areas where it seemed like he had depth in every area that you talked to him about.
And he was a good teach. Alcorn was alluding earlier today about how Jay, who had been working on completely different kinds of things, came in and learned about color video in an afternoon. I taught him a bit about programming when I was apprenticed to him. He hired other engineers like George McLeod and Doug Neubauer. He learned from them as well as taught them. He managed to keep this team of fairly high-powered prima donna types working as a team rather than as a collection of basketball players. And he was able to hold the project. He covered us. He also did a good job of protecting us from destructive interference from upper management. He let guys like Bushnell, who was thinking competent marketing thoughts, in to talk to us about what was going on. But he kept us from being rattled around and hid us from the bean counters for the longest time. Wow. And he was able to hold the complexity because we made the jump from the video computer system to the Colleen system, which was 3 custom chips in parallel. He held it all together.